Hamas's initial lethal attacks on Israel set off diplomatic rifts and international protests, and the conflict has had far-reaching consequences throughout the Middle East. Since the attacks on October 7, more than 3,500 people have lost their lives. Since the beginning of the war, the Lebanese-Israeli border has resounded with the sounds of Hezbollah and Israel's continued reciprocal hostilities, which have brought the entire region to the edge of disaster. Hezbollah, designated a terrorist group by many countries, has its main stronghold near the Israeli-Lebanese border in Lebanon, where it receives support from Iran. Its possible involvement in the Hamas-Israel confrontation has the potential to spark widespread regional unrest. Israel is on high alert after comments made by a Hezbollah spokesman in Iraq escalated the situation. Iraqi Hezbollah spokesman Jafar Hussein claimed, "We announced our engagement in the Al-Aqsa flood operation and our foray into the war. The first of our martyrs died today. The rebel forces have entered the war, and they're aiming for American strongholds. Our efforts will continue." There has been no immediate reaction from Israeli authorities to Hussein's declaration. The day's ongoing battles between the Israeli military and Hezbollah have increased worries at the same time. In retaliation for the roughly 30 long rockets fired into Israeli territory this afternoon, Israeli soldiers expanded their bombardment to include southern Lebanon. 2 anti-tank missiles were fired at the border kibbutz of Manara in northern Israel around 11 a.m. local time, prompting the alarm sirens. Residents of Manara and kibbutz Miskav hid as ordered and blamed anti-tank missile assaults on IDF positions on them for the attack on Manara. 4 hours later, Hezbollah took matters into their own hands. Multiple settlements in Upper Galilee were forced to evacuate as sirens wailed through the night. Thankfully, there are no known casualties at this time. Israeli forces responded to the second salvo of rocket fire by striking targets in southern Lebanon. The rocket fire from Lebanon has continued since then. Subsequently, 3 people, 2 men and a small girl, were hurt when a shell hit a building in the town of Kiryat Mona. Images from Lebanon show the damage that Israeli offensives inflicted on various regions of the nation. Lebanese television channel Lau Manor released what it claimed to be footage of the aftermath of an Israeli Air Force drone strike near Nakori in southern Lebanon. Lau Manor aired the alleged film on its website. The pattern of the fighting over the past few days had not been followed as closely as it was this morning. It is important to note that Hamas in Lebanon, not Hezbollah, was the party responsible for firing the second salvo of missiles against Israel on Thursday. Since Hamas carried out its first attack on Israeli territory on October 7, there has been a significant rise in tensions along Israel's northern border. In the past 2 weeks, Hezbollah, a group that is financially supported by Iran, has carried out sporadic attacks against Israeli villages in the north by firing anti-tank missiles and rockets and using drones to carry out strikes. Concerns have been raised all around the world as a result of the growing number of violent incidents. The United States Embassy in Lebanon has issued a Level 4 travel warning, which advises American citizens not to go to Lebanon at this time due to the unsafe conditions there. It is not a good idea to try to take 2 excursions at the same time. A similar warning has been issued by the British Embassy in Beirut, which instructs its nationals in Lebanon to evacuate the country while there are still opportunities to conduct business there. The citizens of Germany were given similar guidance. In the meantime, officials in the United States have announced that Israeli citizens do not require visas to enter the country for stays of up to 90 days. The initial start date of the waiver, which was the 30th of November, has been moved up in order to assist Israelis seeking sanctuary from the continuing violence with Hamas. It is not known at this time whether or not Hezbollah in Lebanon will become involved in the confrontation that is taking place between Hamas and Israel. Although Hezbollah seeks the same end as Hamas, namely the annihilation of the Jewish state, the latter organization is in a considerably more precarious position. Because of the ludicrous weapons supplied by the United States, Israel's superior military is far more powerful than Hezbollah's. On the other side, Hezbollah has modernized its weapons since the previous conflict in 2006, which took place in Lebanon. IDF spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagar emphasized the nation's duty to meet the challenge of legitimacy against an adversary that disregards the truth. He also noted that Israel now possesses precision-guided missiles and has mobilized hundreds of reservists to strengthen its public diplomacy efforts during the war. Hagar's comments were made in response to a question about whether or not Israel possesses precision-guided missiles. Both Israel and Hezbollah have been sent stern warnings by the United States about the escalating tensions in the region. According to 2 people who are familiar with the issue, the administration of Vice President Joe Biden has apparently been informally discouraging Israel from launching a military assault against Hezbollah in an effort to prevent the ongoing war from spilling over into Gaza. The goal of this endeavor is to prevent the current war from spilling over into Gaza. Despite the fact that there is widespread consensus that Israel needs to confront the growing threat posed by Hezbollah on its northern border in the wake of the attack carried out by Hamas on October 7, questions have been raised regarding whether or not Israel ought to take the initiative in a struggle against Hezbollah in order to gain the upper hand. Officials from the United States have sent a warning to Hezbollah and Iran to refrain from inciting a crisis on Israel's northern front. In addition, the United States has cautioned Israel to exercise the utmost restraint in its military responses so as to avoid a full-scale conflict. Some people have theorized that if Hezbollah were to declare war on Israel, the United States would side with the Israel Defense Forces and help them defeat the terrorist group. As a result, in order to serve as a deterrent to possible adversaries, the Pentagon has stationed 2 aircraft carrier strike groups in the eastern Mediterranean in close proximity to Israel. Simultaneously, the United States of America is making a concerted effort to go after prominent Hamas officials. The United States Department of the Treasury has placed sanctions on 10 important members, activists, and financial facilitators of the terrorist organization Hamas. These individuals have their headquarters in Gaza as well as in other locations. The State Department has made it abundantly clear that these people play a crucial role in aiding Hamas and other terrorist organizations, which in turn makes it easier for terrorist acts to occur, including violent assaults against Israel. The Palestinian people are not the aim of these sanctions, as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has made clear. Rather, Hamas and its infrastructure are the focus of these measures. Since the Hamas attack on October 7, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin have been in constant contact, and this time they spoke on the phone. Austin was given a briefing by Gallant regarding the military's efforts to counter terrorism. In response, Austin emphasized the significance of providing humanitarian aid to the people living in Gaza and urged the Hezbollah in Lebanon to desist from striking Israel from southern Lebanon. In addition, Austin provided Gallant with an update on the EU's security assistance to Israel and underlined the organization's resolve to achieve the release of hostages being held by Hamas. Gallant was present during both of these discussions. The United States of America and other Western countries have responded forcefully to the ongoing hostilities in the Middle East by taking a number of harsh steps. The Israeli army is currently making its way toward the middle of the West Bank. Large-scale mobilization has taken place on the part of terrorist organizations such as Hamas and Hezbollah. When they finally finished arming the rebels, the First World War had already begun. In the late hours of the night, close to 1,000 Israeli forces launched an assault on the order. The state of affairs in the region at the moment is one that can be described as highly unstable. The dramatic story continued to unfold in Italy. After having been in motion for some time, the second aircraft carrier of the United States Navy is currently getting closer to Israeli waters. According to statements made by Russian President Vladimir Putin, his country is keeping a close check on American vessels as they are being patrolled by bombers equipped with hypersonic missiles. The White House has issued a stern warning to Putin on multiple occasions. If you made the incorrect choice, things would turn out very badly for you. Let's jump right into a comprehensive discussion of the recent attacks and events that have taken place. In the beginning, they focused their efforts on the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. We began to organize ourselves around noon. It has come to light that the terrorist organizations Hamas and Hezbollah are receiving substantial shipments of firearms and ammunition. Not long after that, a spokesman for Hamas issued an official statement in which he declared that the organization would join forces with a significant number of rebels in Gaza and the West Bank. This took place not long after the previous statement was issued. The Iranian government's proxies have pledged to maintain their supply of weaponry for the opposition forces. You number in the tens of thousands. As thousands of rebels were seen making their way toward Israeli checkpoints, the intensity of the mobilization began to gradually decrease. This occurred concurrently with the movement of the rebels. A force of approximately 1,200 Israeli soldiers was sent to reinforce the checkpoints, and unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, began actively photographing the area almost immediately after their deployment. The Hammer squad began firing as soon as they saw the rebels getting closer to the checkpoints that they were guarding. It was revealed that after the air warning systems were put into operation, there was an increase in the number of rocket strikes that were carried out by Hamas members. There are Israeli border guards stationed there, and Hamas intends to assault them. As the crisis on the border continues to intensify, all attention has switched to the Mediterranean. This procedure certifies that the rebels are preparing for an attack and activates air defense systems. All eyes are now on the Mediterranean. An Australian aircraft carrier has recently entered Israeli territorial waters, as I mentioned at the beginning of the movie. The aircraft carrier was anchored approximately 10 kilometers away from the coast of Israel, and it was drawing closer and closer to its ultimate goal. As a direct consequence of this, there has been a discernible rise in the number of Russian jets flying over the territory of Syria and the Black Sea. In response to the rising tensions in the Mediterranean region as a result of recent statements made by both the United States and Russia, the White House has issued a warning. Once more, nations located in this region are obligated to proceed with extreme prudence in order to defuse any potentially explosive circumstances. We have sent troops in that area to protect Israel from any future attacks launched by foreign coalitions. The plan's objective is to defuse the crisis, but even a single mistake could have catastrophic effects on the outcome. It was expected that Vladimir Putin, president of the Russian Federation, would issue a critical comment in reaction to the speakers who came before him. Our attention is swiftly drawn to the nearby checkpoint in the security system. It was not long before reports of attack after attack started coming in. The rebels launched their initial assault in the general vicinity of the Shwafed camp. Around the vicinity of the camp, a throng that was probably made up of hundreds of people moved forward and began firing on Israeli soldiers who were guarding the bridge. Concurrently with the initial assault, additional Israeli troops were sent to the checkpoint, and violent combat broke out on the train. This occurred at the same time. As the Israeli army and the rebels engaged in combat to the east of the town of Chebiya, the village itself became the target of the fighting. N and NE stand for north and northeast, respectively. It was during this period that Chebiya is said to have come under attack as well. Following the completion of these phases, Israel made the announcement that the major operation had begun. By swiftly deploying troops to the checkpoints, the Israeli army was able to achieve some degree of forward movement and make some gains. Israeli soldiers moved closer to the village of Nabi Salah, which is located north of Ramallah, and began their assault on the checkpoints there. Following their successful encirclement of the region, Israeli soldiers began their assault and advanced to a point where they were within striking distance of the town. Hamas asserts that a significant number of its operatives were among those killed in the strike. By using this strategy, a secure perimeter was successfully established around the location. Following their successful infiltration into the region to the east of Taipei, Israeli forces were spotted carrying out a lightning-fast raid on the Hamas stronghold. During the course of the attack, which lasted for another hour, there was intermittent gunfire. Hamas has reportedly been receiving reinforcements from the south at the same time that Israeli forces have encircled the organization. As they got closer to the Hamas stronghold at Der Sharif Point, fierce fighting broke out between the two sides. Hamas strongholds in Shiva Shamran came under fire from Israeli soldiers who were stationed near the highway to the east of the attack's rear vantage point. As fighting broke out, it was observed that Israeli special forces were coming in from all different areas. After isolating a Hamas unit and establishing their superiority in the firefight, Hamas militants found themselves in the line of fire of the opposing force. The operation, which took place close to a prominent thoroughfare, led to the deaths and injuries of a great number of Hamas members. 20 individuals made an attempt to flee the region via the highway that was traveling in the direction of the east, but they were unaware that Israeli forces had already encircled the area. The fleeing members of the organization were tracked down by Israeli forces and either eliminated or captured as a whole. The location indicated on the map is the location where a vast cache of explosive munitions belonging to Hamas and other terrorist organizations was found. A buffer zone has been established, despite the fact that combat has subsided close to the zone's northern edge. Israeli military installations are still being attacked and fired upon by various rebel groups. As a result of the establishment of a buffer zone to the south of the coordinates for the strikes, the Israeli troops dispersed themselves across three fronts to the southwest and the north. The border of Israel was the site of fighting. Nevertheless, the rebels quickly ran out of ammunition and supplies and were seriously damaged as a result of this. Several members of the rebel group have been brought into jail by the authorities. After Israeli troops broke through all three lines of defense, it was observed that a large number of rebels fled the area. After the conclusion of the operations, Israeli forces have retreated to checkpoints, leaving themselves vulnerable to attack. As I indicated at the beginning of the movie, many insurgents have been able to acquire guns and ammunition from the Hamas group. Because of this, there has been a considerable increase in the number of fresh rebels joining Hamas ranks. As a direct response to this issue, Israeli officials have established numerous guarded checkpoints throughout the region. Rockets have been fired from Gaza and Lebanon at a number of Israeli cities, including Ashkelon, Tel Aviv, and others that are located near the border with Lebanon. From the two primary bases, rockets were launched. Iron Dome, a defense system designed to shoot down enemy aircraft, operated non-stop throughout the day. Despite the fact that a large number of the missiles were destroyed all at once, it was evident that the terrorist organization known as Hezbollah had fired rockets in the direction of the Israeli city of Kiryat Shimano. There is not a single frame of film that does not show the rockets being intercepted and destroyed by the air defenses. The Israeli Air Force took action after following the prescribed procedure. The Israeli Air Force has begun coordinating frequent strikes in the Gaza Strip and along the border with Lebanon as a direct response to the firing of rockets from those areas. Explosions of a serious nature were heard at Hamas strongholds in the Gaza Strip and the Harbor Strip. The explosion and fire that followed it were responsible for the destruction of 3 high-rise Mars ammo storage facilities that were located in the Harbor Strip. After this, the remaining time until the land operation probably started being counted down in earnest. We made a commitment to keep you informed when new details emerged in the following hours, and we will honor that commitment. We will continue to update you on the most recent events as they occur in the news as a means of boosting your morale and providing you with motivation. Having a passion for videos is fantastic. It is simple to keep track of any updates if you have subscribed to the channel. I extend my best wishes to you and your family, and until we meet again, a hasty farewell. Please come see me sometime in the not-too-distant future. More than a dozen Hamas fighters were killed by a Merkavim MP who was serving with the 401st Iron Rails Brigade near an Israeli Merkava. This MP was responsible for the deaths of the Hamas fighters. Hamas forces were about to encircle him when DEF tanks drove them back and forced them to retreat. Because of the peculiar layout of the city, which included a tunnel system and subterranean shelters, Hamas soldiers had far too many places to hide from advancing tank fire. These sites included underground tunnels and shelters. In a swift act of retaliation for the tank fire from Israel, Hamas exploded military explosives that had been stockpiled in bunkers all throughout Gaza, including the land around those bunkers. This was done to include the immediate surroundings of the bunkers. Israel was prepared for the retaliation attack that Hamas intended to launch and was not surprised by the news. The Israeli military is currently engaging in fierce combat in the region that borders the Gaza Strip, and they are firing shells into the area that they are fighting in. According to what was indicated in the previous sentence, the Rafah border crossing in Egypt is reported to have undergone repairs. Israel has reiterated its demand for the rapid evacuation of the Gaza Strip in light of the opening of this border crossing. It is general knowledge that Gaza and the neighboring settlements still do not have access to electricity or running water, which creates a significant safety concern for those traveling there. Israel has responded to this development by renewing its call for an early withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. In fact, Israel has presented a very powerful argument here and today. It has been claimed by the Israeli military that they will not ease the blockade of Gaza until all Hamas fighters have departed the area. Residents of Gaza are permitted to leave the territory, provided they do so through the Rafah crossing, which is open at the present time. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has pledged that the Gaza Strip and all Hamas fighters will be eliminated as soon as the evacuations are over. In addition to providing financial aid to Israel for its military, the government of the United States has also provided Israel with a state-of-the-art LIDAR radar system, which the United States has not provided to any other country. The Israeli military was able to obtain the intelligence it needed in order to carry out a swift and decisive operation within the Hamas tunnel network. There, it engaged in a hard confrontation with the Hamas militants. This was made feasible as a result of this radar technology, which provided the Israeli army with the ability to obtain the intelligence that it required. As a direct consequence of this, a considerable number of Hamas members were killed or injured. Because of recent events, the United States has decided to cut the amount of money it gives to Israel for its military, which is a step that can be interpreted as an escalation of the conflict that is currently taking place between Israel and Hamas. The administration at the Pentagon issued the proclamation immediately after knowing that American forces would be dispatched to Israel. This information was received shortly after learning that the proclamation would be issued. The inquiry into whether or not Hamas is making use of underground tunnels in the Gaza Strip is said to be a key priority, according to rumors that equipment for using LIDAR radar and trained soldiers from the United States will be supplied to Israel. Because it is able to make use of laser pulses to determine the distance to an object or surface, this radar system in the United States is regarded as being at the cutting edge of technological advancement. The United States handed Israel a radar system that it had never before supplied to any other nation in order to make it abundantly obvious that it would back the Israeli military in any way feasible in the event that another country invaded Israel. This was done in order to make it clear that the United States would support the Israeli military in any way possible. Under these circumstances, the Hamas militia will be completely helpless and unable to take any action. Because they have violated so many of the rules of war, Hamas troops are in a very terrible state on the battlefield. As a result, they are making use of underground tunnels in order to compensate for this situation. The only thing that worked to Hamas' advantage were the underground tunnels, which were located beneath the Gaza Strip. During the conflict, the Israeli army was at a tremendous disadvantage because only members of the Hamas army knew the locations of the entrances and exits. This put the Israeli army at a significant disadvantage. Therefore, the principal goal of the American forces that were dispatched to Israel to fulfill this task was to provide a guarantee that any potentially dangerous underground tunnels in the Gaza Strip would be discovered. These forces are currently in Israel. In order for the American forces to be successful in achieving this aim, they utilized the LiDAR radar equipment that was at their disposal. The Israeli military was aware of the fact that the troops in question were providing assistance to them in the border areas of the Gaza Strip in which they were stationed. The territory surrounding the Gaza Strip is currently being monitored by our radar equipment, which encompasses a vast region that includes a variety of locations. In a short amount of time, a network of tunnels run by Hamas was found in the territory that surrounds the Gaza Strip. These tunnels were uncovered on the land. There are around 5,000 possible entrances and exits from within these tunnels, according to the reports that have been received. After the Israeli Defense Force reached the conclusion that it was time to launch the operation, they requested the assistance of the most elite commandos in Israel to carry out the mission's first objective. The participation of American service members stationed at the LiDAR radar system was vital in making this accomplishment a reality. Early in the morning, Israeli elite commandos were conducting an operation near the Israeli border when they made the first entry into a Hamas subterranean tunnel. This took place during the course of the operation. The action took place close to the border between Israel and Jordan. When this operation was being carried out by the Israeli army, Hamas militias had taken cover within the tunnels to avoid being discovered. As a direct result of this, a violent struggle broke out between the elite Israeli commandos and the Hamas group. Both sides involved lost a lot of people in this conflict. Throughout the course of this operation, a sizable number of Hamas fighters perished as a result of Israeli forces ambushing and taking them by surprise. The earth started to shake shortly after that and kept doing so for a while. According to authorities from the Israel Defense Forces, elite Israeli commandos were making preparations for an operation to penetrate a tunnel that Hamas fighters were exploiting. These officials also admitted that one of the organization's regional intelligence heads had been arrested. Elite Israeli commandos may have held the head of Hamas intelligence captive after they captured him during this operation and interrogated him. Immediately following the conclusion of the interrogation, the Israeli military carried out an airstrike, which ultimately led to the senior Hamas commander Ayman Nofel's murder. When we take into account the comments that were made following this airstrike, we are able to determine that Ayman Nofel was serving in the capacity of senior commander in the QASM brigade of Hamas during the month of November. This is something that we are able to determine because of the comments that were made following this airstrike. As a direct result of this attack, his armed wing was completely wiped out. Some individuals are of the opinion that it was not a coincidence that the conversation with the head of Hamas intelligence took place so quickly after the attack on Hamas commander Ayman Nofel. The Israeli military was able to carry out an operation at the designated site, which resulted in the elimination of the Hamas commander who was there at that place. Important Hamas figures, such as Aim and Nofel, were killed as a result of Israeli military operations that took place at night. Fouad Abubadian, Tazur Ibrahim, and preacher Vail Assad were all found to be deceased the next day after their disappearance. These fatalities were the direct result of military actions carried out by Israel. The United States is worthy of the highest praise for these operations that the Israeli army has carried out and achieved successful outcomes in, since the United States did not hesitate for even a single second to place its own soldiers in harm's way for Israel. When the United States of America assisted Ukraine in its fight against Russia in the past, there was no American military actively participating on either side of the conflict. Unfortunately, the administration of the Pentagon provided its approval for the deployment of troops in Israel. The choice made by the United States of America to make such a big commitment to Israel has garnered a significant amount of attention from a variety of media outlets located all over the world. Do you believe that Israel will emerge victorious from its ongoing fight with Hamas as a result of the apparent assistance that the United States is providing to Israel? As a direct consequence of the most recent operations, Hamas has sustained major damage, as a direct result of which it has lost a sizable number of authorized soldiers. According to the Israeli military, they were successful in their mission to eliminate Bassem Issa, who served as the regional intelligence commander for Hamas. The communist south of the Gaza Strip served as the base of operations for Bassem Issa. Bassamissa was one of the most senior leaders of the November battalions and was instrumental in the planning of missile attacks from Gaza into Israel. In order to carry out these attacks, Gaza fired missiles into Israel. Additionally, he was one of the most senior commanders in Hamas military organization throughout his time there. Before it, the Israeli military had finished making all of the required preparations to launch a ground invasion on the Gaza Strip. However, they decided to put the operation on hold for the time being and postpone it until later. An Israeli military officer recently issued a statement in which they alluded to the fact that a ground strike is the most likely scenario, but they also indicated that other options are possible. The statement was just made public. Because of the discussions he was having, he was eventually located. It wasn't until an Israeli army spokeswoman made this statement public that it became clear what it meant in terms of its implications for operations. Within the limits of the Gaza Strip, Hamas forces were facing tremendous intelligence issues as a direct result of the operations that were carried out against Hamas underground tunnels and the neutralization of Hamas commanders one by one. These problems are a direct result of Israeli military activity. The assassination of the head of Hamas's intelligence service by Israeli forces served as the primary reason for this attack. It would appear that the Israeli side will be able to acquire an advantage in the struggle as a direct result of the operations carried out by the Israeli army, which resulted in significant and widespread deaths among Hamas troops. This would be a direct result of the fact that the Israeli side was able to obtain an advantage in the fight. The Israeli military saw this as a chance to store tanks and other vehicles at the borders of the Gaza Strip. Therefore, as a response to the circumstances, they did just that along those borders. There is a possibility that Israel's efforts to remove Hamas leaders will bring an end to the hostilities between the two sides in the near future.